we're just kind of have a conversation with between me and Zeke, and feel free to ask some questions in a bit later. But we just kind of wanted to have a conversation with you, really, Zeke, and catch up, and just kind of say, like, what are you seeing going on with your role with Dreaming the Impossible, and sort of just give us a bit of a background of sort of your story in youth ministry, and sort of like bring us up to date with what's going on. So maybe we'll just start with, like, what's your story where youth ministry is concerned, and how did you get into it? And that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be down in Bath. It's this is actually where I kindled a relationship with my now wife. So it was a night here, like a good night, not a pure night. Anyway, it was all good.
That's a different breakout session.
Yeah, but so Bath's kind of close to my heart in that way. But I've got a different accent. I'm from Sydney. Came over here when I was 18, pursuing a football career, and it didn't go the way I expected it. But also, God spoke to me powerfully. Like, it was a random story, but I was in a caravan, and I'd come over from Sydney, incredibly bustling, exciting city, to a little town in the south of England called New Milton. I don't even know if anyone's heard of it, but I was in this caravan. I was crying out to God, and I'd already been involved in some youth work stuff, like voluntarily with young people in Sydney, and it was where God started to stir me for the next generation. And it was in that caravan that I said, God, what's the point? My trial didn't work out, long story short, and I said, God, why am I here? And my parents bought me a one-way ticket, and true story, they didn't have the money to pay for my return ticket, so they just said, Zeke, just stay. And so I just cried out to God, and he spoke clearly to me through a passage in Proverbs 16. Man makes his plans, but the Lord determines his steps. And the Lord just said to me, Zeke, get involved with the young people. That's what I want you to do. And so I just started to get involved locally, volunteering at a local youth club. We'd see loads of young people come on a Friday night. Most of them weren't churched. But what I realised is they'd all hang out down a park before they'd come to the youth club. So I would go to the park with a football and do some tricks and get a game going and say, hey, come down to the youth club. So I was kind of like, building relationships. And it was sort of, that park became very significant for me, because I realised that although young people were coming to the church, although they were coming to the youth club, what was amazing is young people were already gathering in that park. But many of them were like smoking their first cigarette, or taking their first drug, or getting drunk for the first time. And so I thought, what would it look like if I spent more time here? And that's where an opportunity with the council and our church, they approached us for some money to employ a detached youth worker. And the youth pastor at the time was like, well, I think we've got a guy, so could we apply for the funding? I applied for the funding, and I got a part-time job at that park. I ended up working at that park for about 8 years, and as well as connected with the church and local schools. And so my story was kind of, I stumbled into youth ministry, but God was already stirring me to do it. It was football that brought me over here, but I would say God kept me here. And then I became the youth pastor at that church, and then connected with the Vineyard. I met a friend of mine that was a youth pastor down in Bournemouth, and I loved what he was doing with his young people. So I'd been at my church for 10 years. My wife and I were getting married, and he was like, we were just chatting, and I was thinking, my wife's like, we're not gonna, I know this is recorded, but she said, if we get married, we're not living in that town. So like, God needs to do something. And God did do something. He just stirred our hearts, and we decided we'd move. We planned to move, but we didn't really know where to go. So I asked that youth pastor basically for his job. I just said, hey, I like your job. Can I have it? I'm not making this up as well. Like, I loved what they were doing as a church. I loved what I heard about the Vineyard and what they were doing in the community. And it was nothing about the church I was part of. I just knew God was moving. So I thought, I'll do my own human way of trying to make God move. But long story short, God did move in a powerful way. He ended up becoming the assistant pastor. I became the youth pastor. I was there for 3 years, and in that, I took on his role as part of the core team to run Dreaming the Impossible youth gathering. So we gather in May. We have been gathering for the last 10 or so years, working with young people, seeing young people come to the gathering. Amazing, God do amazing things in that time. But through that, God was really stirring what would happen with us as DTI, with Soul Survivor Finishing. Mike spoke to us like he spoke to with Rich and the team. And he said, look, I think what you guys doing is God's in it, and he wants you to grow it and expand what you're doing. And we were sort of like, we don't really know what we're doing. We run a youth fest, about 1,500 young people, and youth leaders come. It's kind of going well, but we don't have the capacity. And he's like, that's perfect. You're the perfect kind of people that you don't know what you're doing. God does. You don't have much. God will put it in your hands. So my role now is I work with Deep Dreaming the Impossible Youth Festival to make it happen, but also traveling around the country, working with youth leaders like yourselves and young people, speaking to young people, encouraging them, and really within the Vineyard Church, but it's become broader, to encourage the church to let the little children come to him. You know, Jesus said, let the little children come to me. Do not forbid them, for such is the kingdom. And often when I go to churches, people say, oh, we don't have the finances to invest in the young people. We've got to do the roof, or we've got to do, we've got a training pastor that we need to lead. But 68% of people come to faith before the age of 18. That's the facts. And so almost 2 in 3 people come to faith before the age of 18. So the church must invest. And so that's sort of one of my mantras to the church. Hey, invest in the young people. Jesus, let them come to him, even the little children. He said, come, I want you to understand this and get this. So yeah, that's a bit of my journey, and it's been an exciting ride, really, and it is with the Lord, and it is with young people, because you never know what's going to happen, right? They're changing, and they're going through loads of things, and they're facing more challenges that I think young people in history have ever faced.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of my story a bit.
Cool. Yeah. You mentioned some of the, you've preempted one of my questions already, really. So you've mentioned some of the challenges that young people are facing. What, from your perspective, what are they? Kind of to. Yeah, well, there's so many challenges. I hear stories where young people are like, I look at my phone, I look at my Snapchat, I look at my Instagram, and like I've just got no followers compared to my friend, and so there's already comparison coming into it. I've heard stories of young people just struggling with where their life's going and what's going on in the world. So, but because young people have access so quickly to information, like growing up, we never had. I mean, I had a Nokia 6610. My parents bought me when I was like 16. Anyone remember that? One of the first colour phones with a polyphonic ringtone. Still remember them? I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what we used to call up our mates on the landline and say, hey, I'll meet you at the park in half an hour. And if they didn't come, we hoped they weren't dead. And we probably went and knocked on their door. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's changed so much. So young people have faced so many things: anxiety, depression, comparison, self-harm, pressure to sleep around, to try things, to make money. Young people are becoming massively entrepreneurial. It's great, but it's also a challenge because their character might not be developed. And but I think one of the biggest challenges with young people is knowing who they are. Like that. I've been reading the whole 1 Samuel 18. It's this passage where Saul realizes that David is becoming he's going to become king. And Saul's king, right? But Saul didn't defeat Goliath. David did. David was just this young shepherd boy who was coming up, growing up and developing. And what we see in that story is David had developed his character so that when a giant came, he was able to face the giant head on. Where Saul was in power, but he didn't know how his character wasn't developed. And so I think young people, they're getting opportunities. They know they've got a voice, but they're not always their character and their identity and who they are and where they get their identity is not necessarily shaped by their Father God. It's maybe shaped by all the other things around them. And that is a massive challenge for us as youth workers, because
how do we speak into that? And how do we try to convince them that they need to know what God says about them is the most important thing, rather than what the world is sort of pushing them into or whatever. And we're talking about God who, for so many young people, said, well, I've never heard his voice. Like, he's not in my room. Like, he's not on my phone. We know he is. We know his presence is, and we know he's moving. But there's some of the things that there's so many things, man. But yeah, I think social media particularly is shaping the next generation, and how we interact with that is like a big question, isn't it? Yeah.
I think like one of the things I'm noticing now with Generation Z really starting to come through and become young adults is actually there's just a massive openness to faith. And actually I think one of the things that I'm seeing is, if we look at it now, the millennials, they were sort of clinging on with having some vague experience of church or what that meant was. Generation Z, the majority of them have no experience of church because generationally their parents are the ones who haven't gone to church, so that are coming through now. So I think actually there's a new wave getting ready of people being openness to faith in Generation Z and the generations that are coming underneath Generation Z. And it's I think there's a challenge for us as youth leaders to be more bold in actually speaking out to people who don't know the first idea about Jesus, because now I'm having conversations with young people who are like, well, tell me what this Jesus thing's about. I know nothing about this Jesus thing. The only thing that I know is we used to, if they went to a vaguely Christian school, they would sing songs and a lot of people kind of we were at a freshers fair as a team, and one of the guys said, "Oh, well, come meet our vicar." And they were looking around expecting to see a male, a male, yes, but someone who was very pale and stale. And when they met me, they were like, "Nah, and there's no way you're a vicar." And I was like, well, technically I'm not a vicar, but I am ordained in the Church of England. And they were like, "No, you're way too young. Like you don't look anything like it." And I was like, people just do not have a perception now, these young people, of actually what is a Christian presence like in individuals. And so I guess my question in a segue is, how are you seeing that being worked out with what you're doing with Dreaming the Impossible, in the fact that, for me, there seems in the young people we're dealing with that we meet now, there is just a massive openness to faith and hearing about it. And even Russell Brand's on the prayer train at the minute, releasing his YouTube videos on how to pray. Now, he's not saying who to pray to, but he's like effectively saying, hey guys, prayer is a really great thing. How are you seeing that worked out in what you're seeing? Yeah,
well, one of the biggest things that have come up as I've spoke to youth leaders, it's like, you're right, it's not difficult to gather young people. It is a challenge, but young people will come to events, they'll come to youth club. If you open a youth club and you put something on for them in a local town, they'll probably come. Like, they're interested, they're intrigued. But one of the things that often youth leaders, and I've experienced, it's like, what about so we can often get a decision. We find at DTI, we'll see hundreds come forward. We saw over 150 either recommit their life or give their life to Jesus just at our festival this May. And that's we're not really seeing that to make a decision. We see it at Soul Survivor. We see young people come forward or make decisions or say yes. But it's then the discipleship piece. It's like, but where, it's like Paul says when he gets to Rome, it's like, you've even got a God, you're worshipping a God with an unknown name. It's like, you're here, you believe, but what do you really believe? And one of the things in answer to the question, one of the things that I've been stirred the most about this generation, in a way, as an evangelist myself, I love sharing the gospel with young people. But Jesus didn't actually say, go and tell people the 3-step gospel, or he didn't actually. He just said, "Go and make disciples of all nations." Teaching them to obey all that I've commanded. And that bit, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded, I think is a powerful space for young people, because they might be open to prayer, they might be open to the things of God, they might be open to Jesus, but what does the part about teaching them to obey all that I've commanded? Because Jesus didn't say go and make converts. He didn't say go and get young people to say a prayer, go and get people to say a prayer. He said go and make disciples. And so discipleship is about proximity, and one of our challenges is we have a gathering once a year. We're blessed to have vineyard churches, but now other churches that want to join. It's like, how can we encourage them that you're discipling your young people? And that's got to be life. It can't just be a Friday night. It's got to be, hey, and even that's a challenge now, to invite a young person to your home or to be alone in a cafe, but we've got to find ways for them to see us living it, for them to see what Jesus looks like when he interacts with someone on the street, or how we deal with our finances, or how we deal with our conflict, or so I think one of the challenges we're seeing is we can gather young people, but what are we gathering them around? What are we teaching them? What are we transferring to them? Yeah, I suppose.
It's good.
It's hard, isn't it? Would you guys agree? It's challenging to disciple, especially with sort of health and safety and child protection. It's like, Jesus, he hung out with his boys. They were always around him, and there was so many more. There was always a crowd with him. Sometimes our diaries and our lives can get too difficult to allow people to have proximity, closeness to us. But Jesus, he allowed all that. He allowed closeness. And so we learn from being close. We have this saying that leadership, or things aren't taught, they're caught, We catch things off people. But
I think you're right. I mean, we live in a world where, there's all sort of, it's a changing landscape of how you do youth ministry. And I remember when I was a youth minister 15 years ago now. You would hang out with your young people. You'd share meals, and it'd be very sort of natural that you'd be meeting in maybe their home, or maybe they'd all be coming round. I remember when me and Ruth were first married. I mean, I don't think if we wanted to have a meal on our own, we'd have to go out because we'd always have a bunch of young people. Would be knocking on our door to share a meal, and we just kind of did life with them. And I think that was one of the reasons why we saw those discipleship moments happen. And it's like you say, the events are great, but it's those small conversations that you have that are almost like the light bulb moments that you have with young people. And we've got to find a way that we can continue to do that, because I'm pretty sure it was the same with the disciples when they were with Jesus. I was reading the power of the mustard seed, when Jesus is going like, hey, and they're going like, how Jesus, show us how to increase our faith. And Jesus goes, well, hang on a minute, let's just turn that question round. Surely if you have the smallest amount of faith, God can do amazing things. And it's like, you can see the disciples afterwards are going, oh, right, light bulb moment, bing. And it's like, if we become this sort of Friday night youth club only, there's got to be 4 youth leaders to one person sort of scenario, which I'm not digging, having a dig at safeguarding and all that kind of stuff. That's really, really important. I want people to hear that. But we need to be able to find a way that we can do that. And what's some of the stuff that you're seeing maybe out and about there that you can give us some tips on how that's being done in the 2019 way versus a 2009 way, shall we say?
Well, years ago, I there's a number of churches that are doing a little bit. There's a couple within our movement that do a bit of outreach, so it's more like detached youth work. And some people have sort of said that's a little bit dead, or that young people don't hang out on the street. They do in London. They do. I just drive through cities, and there's always groups of young people hanging about. And so I think because of my job down that local park, it sort of gave me a framework for, there's the connection with the young people that come to let's say go back to Jesus' time, the synagogue, the place where he taught, or the mountaintop where they're all gathered listening. There's that place. But what about the highways and the byways where Jesus was connecting with people and he was using those moments as teaching moments? And so we've seen, like, just encouraging youth leaders to do things like treasure hunting. I don't know, you ask young people, hey, we've got a blank sheet of paper, we're just going to wait on the Lord. Why don't you just, whatever comes to your mind, no thought is too wacky. Like, let's just write it down on a piece of paper, and then we're going to go out into the city centre for a couple of hours and see who we bump into. I remember doing this, in Oxford, also in Brighton. We had a young person say, there's someone with a hole in their head. I'm like, that's not even physically possible, but yeah, go on, mate, write it down. Thinking, this is wrong, and we were out on the street and we're just talking to people, but we'd written on a board, just as we were praying and doing different activities, Jesus wants to heal, and we had hole in the head. Guy comes up, right towards the end of the day and says, yeah, I've had an operation, I've actually got a hole in my skull. Could you pray for me? That little young person just gets this amazing opportunity, lay hands, random guy, pray for him. And we don't know, he didn't feel a pop, so, but he was blessed. And young, so I think some of the, how can we get out? And it doesn't have to be like creative things. One of the things I've found that people have done is of just a simple question. Hey, we're out here praying for people. We want to bless this community. Is there anything we could pray for you? The miracle question, like if God could do a miracle in your life, what would it be? Young people love that. Or even getting a massive white piece of paper. We had one church did this and just wrote, I heart the city. And people are like, what are you? And they were giving out chocolates. This is what you're up to. We just, hey, come and write whatever you want about that you love about the city. We had a lady come, or the story goes, the lady came, she was literally that morning thinking about killing herself. She said, I've had suicidal thoughts today. Just starting to think about what I love about this city has just lifted me. Young people gathering around her, praying with her. I mean, this is like John Wimber, the founder of the Vineyard, he used to say the meat is on the street. And I know I'm coming with this is my youth work background, but I just think there's so much more outside that we could be engaging with. There's how can we connect with those that are on the periphery? Maybe once a week, just going there, or saying to our team, "Hey, we're gonna who will come with me? Let's just pray for this community." Yeah, I don't know. There's cool. A couple of things.
Great. I think one of our values here at Movement is also how do we empower young people to be all that God's called them to be, and we love seeing young people step up, and everybody says to me, "Oh, you've got such a young team," and that's on purpose, because that's part of what we're about, is giving young people the opportunity to do what God has called them to be, to step into those giftings and those ministries. But sometimes in my experience, sometimes in the church, us as youth leaders, we can become sort of the shield that protects the young people, but actually it's about how do we create opportunity within our context to allow young people to step up into those moments. And I just wonder if you've got any stories of seeing that in action that you can share with us, and some tips maybe of how do you facilitate that.
I just want to say, Rich, you have a gift of this, and you guys, you've probably seen Rich, and I had the privilege, I remember speaking at one of the first, I don't even know where it was around here, but
Tuesday St. John, wonderful place.
I think it was, yeah. But I came in and I'm like, man, he's got young guys, young girls, they're all over the place, doing stuff, whether it's handing out donuts or whatever. And so I love that you live this. And I think I was at a church the other day. I just was speaking. We were there together, James and I, and we got greeted by a whole group of young people. they just greeted us on the door, and it was their youth work Sunday that they were celebrating, but these young people, they were just saying hello and getting to chat to us. And then another young person they literally put up who hosted the whole meeting, and some people would have said it was a train wreck, but like it was beautiful. Like it's just joking about, and like he was, getting it a bit wrong, but he was leading the meeting, and I'm like, wow. And he was only like 14, 15. I'm like, wow, they're like, and so I think when we're in our conversations with the senior leaders of our churches, it's just saying, hey, have we thought about when young people come into this church, or when they come into this gathering, into this building, can they see themselves being able to participate in any other way than being on a seat? And I think somehow thinking about what are the ways, testimonies, getting young people to share testimonies. I mean, I've heard, we just had a testimony at our church recently of they asked the children in children's ministry to just wait on God and see if God had any words that they would give to the church. And so I just heard this one yesterday, actually. A little girl said, man, I've completely forgotten the story. That's great. A little girl, it's gone.
I think they call that a senior moment.
Yeah,
I'm having a few of those. Maybe I'll let you think about what the story is, and I'll interject for you on your behalf.
That's cool.
I think one of the things that you very kindly said that we do really well, but the reason why we do it is because we're passionate about seeing young people be all that God's called them to be, and we have to create space for them to do that. And actually that involves actually going, do you know what, it's not going to be the best first time out, because guess what, we weren't the best first time out either. Sure. And so it's about, we need to have this bucket load of grace that is super encouraging as well for our young people to step up and step out. And I think one of the reasons why young people generally leave the church is because there isn't a place for them to serve or feel like they can serve. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is a serious lack of young people within the church, and that's something I passionately want to see change. I want it to be young people being at the forefront of church. If we look and see what's going on right now with all this climate change stuff that's going on, which is fantastic, but who is it being led by? It's being led by a girl who's 16, I think, Greta, and she's somehow managed to get the rest of the world to journey along with her. Now, what if the church did that? What if the church enabled young people to reach more young people and gave them that ability to do that, without saying, no, it's not your time yet. Actually, you can only do that on Youth Work Sunday. I think Youth Work Sundays are great, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, what if that was just what we did the whole entire time? And I think that's what we're trying to do here with Movement, and create a family where people are empowered to be all that God has called them to be by actually giving them space to do what God is calling them to do. And it's not just within the church. I want to see young people being Christian leaders in the workplace that they feel calling to. I want to see them be missionaries in the place where God has called them to be in the workplace. Ruth, my wife, is a teacher. She's super passionate about her job, but she sees her mission field actually is the classroom. And I think we need to be saying to young people, do you know what? Actually, the aspiration of the mission field isn't just within the church. Actually, it's within the workplace that God is calling you to be. I had a friend who went to a what did you want to be when you grow up party last night, and we had to dress up, and loads of people went as firemen and police officers and nurses, and one of them wanted to be a dinner lady because she thought the best thing ever was to be wiping tables, which the dinner ladies does. I'm just like, but surely that is a place where you can be a missionary in that mission field that God is calling you to be in the workplace. And so, yes, in the church, yes, in the mission field, but I think that's what we're passionate about here. Is actually we want to empower young people to be all that God has people, or anybody, to be honest. We want to empower all people to be what God has called them to be. And have you thought of your story now?
It is.
Have you got a new segue that you want to come back at me with?
I mean, I suppose I just think one of the ways sometimes that we can value young people is by time. Time is kind of, think about your childhood. Think about the people that you really remember made an impact on your life. They were probably the people that you spent the most amount of time with. There's figures in your life that you didn't need to spend time with. They were just inspiring. But the ones who shaped you, the ones who molded you, the ones who really spoke into your life, that's also how do we invest in young people? How do we put them at the forefront? They don't always need to be at the front. It's more at the front of our minds. It's I'm going to give up time. I'm going to give up energy. I'm going to give up. I remember discipling a young lad. He was a nightmare situation. He was sort of one of the first people I ever really truly discipled. And when I say disciple, he was involved in my life. That's discipleship. It's not kind of we meet once a week and we pray and we try to open the Bible. No, it's proximity. We hang out with. And when I met him, when he came to the youth club, his mum was the local drug dealer. His dad had told him, "I don't want to know you," physically said it to his face. He'd left. And his stepdad was in prison at the time. And we spent so much time together. He did my flipping head in. He was so annoying. He broke things. He stole money from me. He stole money from the church. He was awkward. He didn't really know about cleanliness. He didn't really know about all of these things. He'd been excluded 16 times from school that year we met him, in 1 year. And but what I realised is it was time with him. It was proximity in my life, and him just seeing how I dealt with money, and him seeing how I dealt with relationships, and him seeing how I got things wrong. And so I think calling the church back to our time with the next generation, and being intentional with timings, our time, our diary, setting it aside for the next generation. I just think that's kind of the best thing that I can encourage you guys to do with your life. It's so important, and we the more and more I've been on the road, and the more and more I get invited to things, the more and more I realise who can come with me, who can be close, who can see what I'm like, not just what I'm like on a stage or in an interview or preaching or doing something fancy, but who can see what Zeke's really like, and it's a challenge, so.
One of the things I love about Zeke is that whenever we meet, we always go for a burger. And I think we're ticking off all the different burger chains between us, aren't we? And yes. And Honest Burger, yeah. So that's been ticked off now. So there's a few other places for us to go. But I think it's those moments that you're just talking about, isn't it? It's about actually, where do we go for a burger with a young person and have those sort of, it's the case of having those moments where we can just have those honest conversations and just say well, actually, what's going on behind the closed doors? And I think you're right. I think it's actually it's let's create space to do that. And so I kind of just want to make sure there's some space for some questions, and just see if anybody's got any questions you want to ask Zeke or me, maybe.
So, Zeke Rink, one of the things that you're pushing here, which I agree with, is that notion of getting involved with young people. Now, at the same time, you guys are stepping into a season, particularly post-Soul Survivor, where you're moving into a different sphere, if you like, which really involves moving away, if you like, and that sort of step up, moving away from your personal contact time, less and less with young people, and the opportunities for when you've got a group of young people of 6 or 12, and at that 12 you've got 3 or 4 fringes and 3 or 4 kind of keen and 3 or 4 stars. Out of those you could go, let's encourage you in worship leading, let's encourage you've got a heart for evangelism, let's invest in you. When that youth group isn't 12, it's 1,200. You still only need 6 people in the worship band and one preacher, and and so there's less opportunity to do that and less space and time to invest in those people. What are the things that you're clocking already? This is where my question comes in. What are the things that you're clocking already in the way that you're having to adapt to that and keep the values that you're expressing here?
I am. One of my friends, Tim Orford, and we're both of our friends. He's actually kind of inspired. I've always been a youth pastor. I've only not been a youth pastor or youth leader for the last year. So it's quite a sharp. What you're explaining is a definite tension in my life. But he said, you know, I started a youth ministry at my church, and I handed it on. So he's there every week. And my situation is slightly different, where we have a youth team, but we have in the church that I'm part of is tiny youth ministry, and I'm just like, I'm not even going to get involved because it's just too much. They need to grow and develop. And so, but one of the things I do personally is I actually go to an estate near my home. We're just about to move on to an estate, but another one, because there'd been 3 murders in the space of 7 months, and I just had a burden that I'm going to go there once a week. Rain, hail or shine, I'm just going to hang out. I'm going to chat to young people. I'm going to pray for young people. I'm going to see what the Lord does. And I've got now a friend that comes with me. And so for me, it's an intentional time where I'm going to hang out with young people. They're not Christian kids. They're not in the church. They're just bumping around the estate. And we've had some crazy things happen. 2 weeks ago, we saw a lad on crutches, completely healed. He walked away. He was smiling. Loads of big group gathered, and he walked away with his crutches in his hand. Now, I recognise I don't have super proximity to those young people, but I want to be able to let young people see Jesus that don't know him. And if I can bring any of that, so for me, that I have to have that in the diary. I've made conscious, and it's not just 2 hours, it could be 3 or 4, whatever happens on that estate. And so for me, but then I suppose in terms of discipling young people, that's another challenge. I'm like, how can I invite, so thinking more about inviting young people on the road to me, or do it, or, you know, whatever we can do. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But it's basically a tension, and I have the joy of being able to travel to youth ministries and get continuity with youth leaders, and so I get to see young people over. So my thing is, if ever I see a young person in a youth club on their own, I'm straight over. The other week, we were at Trent Vineyard. I mean, there's like 200 young people in their youth ministry, massive. Young girl sat on her own, she's drawing, and I just say, hey, can you draw a picture of my face? Can you just do that? You're amazing at art. You're incredible. She starts telling me about her life and her story, and I think it's seeing the moments, because sometimes, although that example's in the diary, there needs to be other times where it's not scripted, it's not in the diary. It's just you see a young person, you see the need, and that's what Jesus was the master of doing. He was the master of seeing the marginalised person, the woman at the well, whoever it was, saying, do you know what, I'm going to take time. So it's a challenge. I've kind of answered the question. It's complex, but I think that's something that I'm seeking to do.
Very similar to Zeke, but I think the one thing that I love doing is pastoring my team, who I know are on, I love pastoring my team, who are also about pastoring other youth leaders and helping to facilitate what we do with movement. And one of the things that we value the most is your opinions, and because we recognise that you guys are the ones who are sort of on the hard coalface of doing the ministry. And movement started because to be a resource ultimately to existing youth ministry. I left my job working for a large Anglican church as their youth pastor, and here in Bath, and because there was a heart to go to the places that didn't have a great youth ministry, that didn't have full-time youth leaders who could spend weeks and hours preparing for ministry. It was dealing with those youth leaders who actually put probably just as much amount of time in, but they're volunteers. And ultimately it's a case of where is there something stable for them to bring young people to. where they can come and experience God in a way that they might not necessarily to be able to do on their own. And so that was really the heart behind the movement. And yes, you're right. I agree with Zeke. It's attention, but I'm just like Zeke. Whenever I see a young person, I just want to have a conversation with them in the same way and just say, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on?" And I'm always looking for an opportunity to tell them that Jesus loves them and he has got a plan for their life. So I hope that answers your question. Is there any other questions out there? Yeah, Tom?
Can you talk a little bit about leading teams of young leaders? And Rich, you mentioned a really interesting phrase just in passing earlier, but I know it's something you do brilliantly. You talked about creating a family. Can you just talk about how you do that? Well, how do you create a family of young leaders who...
I think, for the movement core team, they're individuals that God has really put a burden on my life to pastor them, to look after them and see them developed, and it's something that was done for me when I was a young person. I'll be quite honest, like, it wasn't for my boys brigade captain / youth leader who sort of plucked me from obscurity. I don't think I would be in this place today because he spent time with me. He like what we're talking about, he created, I can't remember the amount of late night burgers. There's obviously a running theme in my life here. The late night burgers that he had with me, and I think it's just something that I've just picked up. It's just become part of my DNA, and I just love doing life with my team and hanging out with them. And I think the reason why it's family is because if it feels like a job and a chore, then that's not family. Family is someone you can hang out with regardless of whether whether you're upset with them or whether you're elated and proud of them. We do it as family because actually I'm not really willing to give up on them. God has called these young leaders into my life, and he's sort of given me the job of discipling them really as best as I possibly can. And I don't always get it right. I constantly say I am the rookie at this, and I don't have all the answers. I don't, this isn't supposed to be a come to Rich and Zeke. We have all the answers for you. We don't. I know Zeke's heart, and my heart is that we're just figuring it out as we go along too. But yeah, do things as family. Stuff like having meals for your team. Make sure your house is always open to them, and when they're going through a bad thing, don't wait until your next meeting. Pick up the phone and talk to them straight away. It's all those kind of things I do with my team, and I think one of the things in leadership that sometimes we can get sort of too head about is I've got to make all of the final decisions, blah 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 blah. Actually, that's not the case. Like, I really love working collaboratively. And it's like, actually, the deal with me and my team is that we try and make as many decisions as possible together. And if somebody has to make the final word, then the final decision, then it sort of comes down to me to do that. But just it's doing life together. And when you do life together, you're making decisions as a team. It's just so much easier. It doesn't really feel like a burden at all. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Just give as much responsibility away as quickly as you can with godly wisdom as you can. I remember one of the things I used to do, because I'm from Australia, I would be a youth pastor, but then I'm like, I've got to go home for like 3-4 weeks. So someone's going to have to lead the youth ministry. And one of the best things I did, and I've often said this to leaders, is make sure I plan times to go away when they would have to lead. So, and you talk to the person, whoever your next person who's maybe the most equipped or the most ready. And then you don't just let that be the person, you switch it up. If there's another one on your team who needs to go, hey, you're this week. Why? I'm off. Next 3 weeks I'm going to Australia. Hey, sorry, what? Who's going to lead this? Well, I'm not going to lead it from Skype, am I? You are. And but suddenly they're like, oh, okay, I need to actually take some ownership here. So I think allowing others to feel the weight of responsibility. Otherwise, that's what Aaron said to was it Aaron? No, that's what who said it to Abraham, to Moses. Who said it to Moses? Is it Josh? No. Moses was leading all these people. They were all
Jethro.
coming to him. Jethro came up to him and he said, "Hey, what are you doing, man? Your whole day is full of meetings, meeting with all these people with complaints. Delegate, give them responsibility. So family 100%, but we find at DTI we want to give more people opportunity, and if they fail or they mess up, don't not talk to them. Don't wait to have the chat. As soon as they come off, say, that was great, but hey, what did you learn? That's one of the questions I always ask people. What's your biggest learning curve? Mate, I got up there and I didn't plan. Hey, if I'm honest, it was kind of obvious. So what can you do next time? So I think, but if you can go away from your youth group or your youth ministry or whatever you're leading, and you can delegate responsibility, key. Book in a holiday, guys. Some of you need to book in more holidays.
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to do that.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah?
Another question. So I'm from a small church in Churton, and we've got quite a small youth ministry. But where we're really seeing growth is in the sort of attached youth work.
Yeah.
Just kids that would be on the street, we're talking 11-year-olds
Yeah, wow.
after, well, we haven't got very old teenagers at the moment, but you said that you had been hanging out and pursuing these young people on the street and ended up praying for someone with practice and receiving healing. And I guess what's really been on my heart is where I see God moving and bringing more youth in to meet with us, and they know it's a church-run youth group, and it's not overtly, we don't do worship, we do games, we do community, we do safety, we do food. How can I, or would you have any tips for crossing that threshold of, hey, I'm hanging out with the youth in the park, can I pray for you? Or, oh, I had something funny. I don't know, would you have any tips for bringing that in? We're not overtly going for it being evangelistic from the outset. That's what I would love. I would love for those deals of healing. I mean, I know they have to be covered in prayer.
For sure,
God, but how, to their faces, to speaking with them, how do you bring it in?
I think, oh man. No, it's good, but I'm just thinking there's so many responses I could make. But I think as the church and as Christians, we've got to just go after it. I think we've got to be more ready to say, do you know what? Guys, often I say to young people, guys, this might be weird, but I've noticed what happened, bro? Just normal. Hey, what happened to your leg? Football. Oh, I love football. Has anyone prayed for you to be healed? I know that sounds random, but has anyone ever prayed for you? And it's just be yourself, because what was your name? Emma, you're Emma. And so if I came and did it, I'd do it like me, because that's my style. But find your way. One of the things I used to have a rule with my youth team. We had a generic youth club. It wasn't overtly Christian. We did have a God slot. I pushed for that. It's my nature, the way I am. But I said, guys, do not let anyone who's ill, sick, limping, whatever, come into this building and leave without you offering them prayer. Just find your own way. But obviously, creating a culture. But then who's the first one to pray? Zeke's the first one to pray. So I didn't really let him through the door without them pray. And then when I said to the team, hey, did anyone pray? And said, oh yeah, I prayed as well. Oh, brilliant. They got whacked twice. I think it's being intentional. One of the things on the estate, we're unapologetic. Guys, we're Christian. We chat with people, but we're just very overt. And there's nothing there's covert evangelism, there's overt evangelism, and I think covert is a great way with young people. But when we're saying, hey guys, we believe it, but it's going to take faith, because honestly, when I prayed for that kid and he didn't get healed the first time, it was quite awkward, but we just pressed in, and then suddenly more people came around, and hey, Jesus, it's his reputation. Do you know, if we fail, it's actually God's reputation that's on the line? I know that sounds a bit brash, but it is. It's his church he's building. It's his family he's creating. It's his message that's at stake. He told me to go raise the dead, heal the sick. If I'm not prepared to do that, sorry, I sound like I'm preaching a bit, but I just want to encourage you, Emma. You have everything. God has equipped you and anointed with everything you need. It's just stepping into it.
Yeah.
And you already know where you could or couldn't, and Lord, I pray that Emma would step into a new season of boldness, that she would know that everything in her, you've put in her. Lord, the same Jesus that raised, the same Spirit that raised you, Jesus, from the dead is living in her. And I pray that you'd equip her, anoint her, and I pray against fear as well. You see, fear, amen, fear is false evidence appearing real. Now, like sickness, disease, when the instant thing is, but what if he doesn't get healed? That's just fear. What's the antidote to fear? Faith. That's, if you're afraid, step out in faith. Anyway, I'm sort of preaching now, but it's amazing that you're out there. I love that. Yeah.
Cool. I'm not going to add anything to that, but there was one question. Yeah.
That's all right. You've touched on it briefly, but how do you think that we can practically walk out discipleship with close proximity while also having safeguarding best practice, as something we hold really high and want to be really conscious of? How do you think we walk that tension between the two?
You have to honour the safeguarding practices. So I'm not going to stay here and say you need to break this rule in order to see your youth ministry grow. You've got to work in those parameters, mainly to protect yourself more than anything else. That's what safeguarding is there for. Yes, it's to protect the young person, but it's also to protect you. And so I would say, just as the young people are entrepreneurial, we as youth leaders need to be entrepreneurial too in how we reach them, how we tell the gospel. And so it's looking for those moments where, hang on a minute, is there space here that we can do this differently? And it may be a case of actually, yes, it's got to be more of a group thing rather than it used to be a one-on-one thing. I would say look for those entrepreneurial. I can't give you an example right now, but because my mind's going, I'm having a Zeke moment. I would say look for an entrepreneur. There are ways that the Holy Spirit will lead you to be able to have those things. And it's going back to that moment of faith. What you're saying is actually, Holy Spirit, show me how I can reach into this situation. Or actually, Holy Spirit, I'm feeling that you want me to have a conversation with this individual. Would you make them come and have a conversation with me? Give us an opening to share on this. And I know it sounds silly, but I used to love playing FIFA, mainly because I used to want to try and beat most of my youth group to have some form of street cred with them. And so I used to, when the new FIFA came out, I would literally schedule a few days and I would say, I'm practicing FIFA. I would be there on the internet looking at what are the new sort of routes and stuff like that, because I found actually that all the boys wanted to try and beat me at FIFA, and sometimes they would win, and sometimes I'd let them win. Sorry, but I did it intentionally because I was like, actually, I'm gonna have some great conversations here with the guys I'm pastoring. And then I would look for those sort of moments, and you can't do it now, but I love the story of how Mike would take people for driving lessons. How that was him looking for a way to how do we do this. For me, it was playing FIFA with the guys. I used to put the training hours in order to be undefeated, because it used to be winner stays on. So that was one of the reasons why I had to put the effort in. But I was able to have those conversations with I've heard this. Great shot, by the way. I've heard this, and they'd be like, oh yeah, no, such and such. Yeah, there was a fight at school this week, and I got a bit too into it, and those kind of things, and you'd be able to say, well, hey, why do you think that happened? And then be able to process them with them, also while you're desperately trying to still beat them and score a goal. So it was looking for those things, and so.
Yeah, one of the things we used to do, I don't know if you have a couple of volunteer team members, or maybe you are a volunteer, but we would divvy up the youth, the amount of young people we had, and we'd give them 3 or 4 young people. And I'd say, guys, they're your young people, you're their pastor, so you pray for them. It sounds like I dictated, but could you please pray for them? And we even did the whole phone call thing, find their home number, phone their parents. I said, guys, I want to encourage you to know their parents. I knew all of the parents, the young people, because that's important. And then there's advice through parents and stuff like that. So I'd encourage you to but also in the environments you're in, be intentional about those people. Tonight I'm going to have a chat with Elizabeth, or I'm going to have a chat with Simon, or and so really in your mind going after that. But permission from parents is actually part of safeguarding. And so if the permission is from the parents, and you could meet in their like I've had meetings with young people in their home, their parents just been in another room, or I bring someone with me, or I have 2 young people come and meet me, or I take 3-4 young people out for a burger, and then you chatting, and so there's many ways that we can do it. FIFA's a great idea,
So
Anyway.
look for those moments of what are your young people into, and use it as an opportunity.